Before we get into this latest story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Quotes and Notes on James Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, Part 1. One habit that I've got into over the last few years has been the annotated documenting of what I consider to be important passages from books I'm reading for pleasure. It's basically a personal highlights package of the tome in question, together with my own observations. Christopher Hitchens' memoir Hitch 22 had its moments, while I found Winston Churchill's My Early Life particularly noteworthy. However, eclipsing those two heavyweights is James Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson. So much of both Boswell's and Johnson's words resonated with me. For one, it's thanks to that biography that I've started writing a diary again. Not that I've much to put in it during these rather oppressively normal times. But much more than that, for a book published in 1791, I found that I could relate to many of Johnson's observations and struggles, to say nothing of his words of wisdom. It's why, having finally finished reading it, I now feel compelled to share my highlights with the wider world, hence this piece. Also, and at the risk of coming across as pretentious, I'm also sharing my notes on the quotes and passages I've selected. With over 16,000 words to share, I intend to do this in 3 parts. For this audio version, when the text is from Boswell, I'll do my best to put on a mild Scottish accent. Boswell was Scottish, after all. For Johnson, I'll use what I consider to be a posh English accent. Now, Johnson was born in the town of Lichfield near Birmingham, in England's West Midlands, so he might have spoken with what's called a Brummie accent, but I think he'll sound better with a more refined speech. And my attempt at a Brummie accent would most likely not be the best, either. Let's get going. Sir, there is nothing which has yet been contrived by man by which so much happiness is produced as by a good tavern. A tavern chair is the throne of human felicity. I pretty much agree with that, although I do prefer to stand in my tavern tienda bar of choice. In every picture there should be shade as well as light, and when I delineate him without reserve, I do what he himself recommended, both by his precept and his example. Those were Boswell's words, as you can tell by my Scottish accent. He used to beat us unmercifully, and he did not distinguish between ignorance and negligence. For he would beat a boy equally for not knowing a thing as for neglecting to know it. He would ask a boy a question, and if he did not answer it, he would beat him, without considering whether he had an opportunity of knowing how to answer it. For instance, he would call up a boy and ask him Latin for a candlestick, which the boy could not expect to be asked. Now, sir, if a boy could answer every question, there would be no need of a master to teach him. This reminds me of a teacher we used to have in St. Nathan's Secondary School, Ballahadreen, a Miss O'Connor, if I recall correctly, and her damned if you do, damned if you don't line of questioning. She'd shout out, "Answer me!" Then, if and when you tried to answer, she'd interject with, "Don't back-answer me!" He had, from the irritability of his constitution, at all times an impatience and hurry when he either read or wrote. A certain apprehension arising from novelty made him write his first exercise at college twice over, but he never took that trouble with any other composition, and we shall see that his most excellent works were struck off at a heat, with rapid exhaustion. I could certainly do with some of that impatience and hurry in my endeavours. Ah, sir, I was mad and violent. It was bitterness which they mistook for frolic. I was miserably poor, and I thought to fight my way by my literature and my wit, so I disregarded all power and all authority. I've pretty much always tried to disregard all power and authority. Mr. Hector recollects his writing that the poet had described the dull sameness of his existence in these words, "Vitam contenet una dies," one day contains the whole of my life, that it was unvaried as the notes of the cuckoo, and that he did not know whether it was more disagreeable for him to teach or the boys to learn the grammar rules. This, too, has largely been my experience with teaching English. Pope, without any knowledge of him but from his London, recommended him to Earl Gower, who endeavoured to procure for him a degree from Dublin. It was, perhaps, no small disappointment to Johnson that this respectable application had not the desired effect. Yet how much reason has there been, both for himself and his country, to rejoice that it did not succeed, as he might probably have wasted in obscurity those hours in which afterwards he produced his incomparable works. Dublin, no doubt, would have destroyed Johnson. A man who writes a book thinks himself wiser or wittier than the rest of mankind. He supposes that he can instruct or amuse them, and the public to whom he appeals must, after all, be the judges of his pretensions. Dress, indeed, we must allow, has more effect even upon strong minds than one should suppose, without having had the experience of it. Dress to impress. Mr. David Hume related to me from Mr. Garrick that Johnson at last denied himself this amusement from considerations of rigid virtue, saying, "I'll come no more behind your scenes, David, for the silk stockings and white bosoms of your actresses excite my amorous propensities." The pretty ladies backstage were too much for Johnson. Such a tease. This is a strong confirmation of the truth of a remark of his, which I have had occasion to quote elsewhere, that a man may write at any time, if he will set himself doggedly to it. For notwithstanding his constitutional indolence, his depression of spirits, and his labour in carrying on his dictionary, he answered the stated calls of the press twice a week from the stores of his mind during all that time. I often have that depression of spirits, which makes one wonder what's the point. At least Johnson was getting paid for his writing. Of course, I may, quite literally, be trying my hand at something that's beyond me. The greatest benefit which one friend can confer upon another is to guard and excite and elevate his virtues. Or a friend who accentuates one's positives, yet is cognizant and critical of one's negatives. Johnson assured me that he had not taken upon him to add more than 4 or 5 words to the English language of his own formation, and he was very much offended at the general licence, by no means modestly taken, in his time not only to coin new words, but to use many words in senses quite different from their established meaning, and those frequently very fantastical. Although, as we'll see, he came up with a few interesting definitions himself. In a letter to the Earl of Chesterfield, 7th of February, 1755. Is not a patron, my lord, one who looks with unconcern on a man struggling for life in the water, and, when he has reached ground, encumbers him with help? The notice which you have been pleased to take of my labours, had it been early, had been kind, but it has been delayed till I am indifferent and cannot enjoy it, till I am solitary and cannot impart it, till I am known and do not want it. I hope it is no very cynical asperity not to confess obligations where no benefit has been received, or to be unwilling that the public should consider me as owing that to a patron which Providence has enabled me to do for myself. Johnson, having now explicitly avowed his opinion of Lord Chesterfield, did not refrain from expressing himself concerning that noble man with pointed freedom. This man, I thought, had been a lord among wits, but I find that he is only a wit among lords. And when his letters to his natural son were published, he observed that they teach the morals of a whore and the manners of a dancing-master. A few of his definitions must be admitted to be erroneous. Thus windward and leeward, though directly of opposite meaning, are defined identically the same way, as to which in considerable specs it is enough to observe that his preface announces that he was aware there might be many such in so immense a work, nor was he at all disconcerted when an instant was pointed out to him. A lady once asked him how he came to define pastern the knee of a horse. Instead of making an elaborate defence, as she expected, he at once answered, "Ignorance, madam, pure ignorance." His definition of network, anything reticulated or decussated at equal distances, with interstices between the intersections. This definition has been often quoted with sportive malignity as obscuring a thing in itself very plain. But to these frivolous censors no other answer is necessary than that which we are furnished by his own preface. His introducing his own opinions and even prejudices under general definitions of words, while at the same time the original meaning of the words is not explained, as his Tory, Whig, pension, oats, excise, and a few more, cannot be fully defended, and must be placed to the account of capricious and humorous indulgence. Talking to me upon this subject when we were at Ashburn in 1777, he mentioned a still stronger instance of the predominance of his private feelings in the composition of this work than any now to be found in it. You know, sir, Lord Gower forsook the old Jacobite interest. When I came to the word renegado, after telling that it meant one who deserts to the enemy a revolter, I added, sometimes we say a Gower. Thus it went to the press, but the printer had more wit than I, and struck it out. Here are some of his definitions. Tory, one who adheres to the ancient constitution or the state and the apostolical hierarchy of the Church of England, opposed to a Whig. Whig, the name of a faction. Pension, an allowance made to anyone without an equivalent. In England, it is generally understood to mean pay given to a state hireling for treason to his country. Oats, a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. Excise, a hateful tax levied upon commodities, and adjudged not by the common judges of property, but wretches hired by those to whom excise is paid. In a letter to Bennet Langton in 1758. None of your suspicions are true. I am not much richer than when you left me, and, what is worse, my omission of an answer to your first letter will prove that I am not much wiser. But I go on as I formerly did, designing to be some time or other both rich and wise, and yet cultivate neither mind nor fortune. Do you take notice of my example, and learn the danger of delay? When I was, as you are now, towering in the confidence of 21, little did I suspect that I should be at 49, what I now am. I was much pleased with the tale that you told me of being tutor to your sisters. I, who have no sisters nor brothers, look with some degree of innocent envy on those who may be said to be born to friends, and cannot see, without wonder, how rarely the native union is afterwards regarded. It sometimes indeed happens that some supervenient cause of discord may overpower this original amity, but it seems to me more frequently thrown away with levity, or lost by negligence, than destroyed by injury or violence. We tell the ladies that good wives make good husbands. I believe it is a more certain position that good brothers make good sisters. The Idler is evidently the work of the same mind which produced the Rambler, but has less body and more spirit. It has more variety of real life and greater facility of language. He describes the miseries of idleness with the lively sensations of one who has felt them, and in his private memorandums, while engaged in it, we find, "This year I hope to learn diligence." Many of these excellent essays were written as hastily as an ordinary letter. Mr. Langton remembers Johnson, when on a visit at Oxford, asking him one evening how long it was till the post went out, and on being told about half an hour, he exclaimed, "Then we shall do very well." He, upon this, instantly sat down and finished an Idler, which it was necessary should be in London the next day, Mr. Langton having signified a wish to read it. "Sir, you shall not do more than I have done myself." He then folded it up and sent it off. Johnson didn't know what idleness was. Letter to Joseph Baratti, 20th of July, 1762. Last winter I went down to my native town, where I found the streets much narrower and shorter than I thought I had left them, inhabited by a new race of people, to whom I was very little known. My playfellows were grown old, and forced me to suspect that I was no longer young. My only remaining friend has changed his principles, and was become the tool of the predominant faction. My daughter-in-law, from whom I expected most, and whom I met with sincere benevolence, has lost the beauty and gaiety of youth, without having gained much of the wisdom of age. I wandered about for 5 days, and took the first convenient opportunity of returning to a place where, if there is not much happiness, there is, at least, such a diversity of good and evil, that slight vexations do not fix upon the heart. May you, my Barati, be very happy at Milan, or some other place nearer to, sir, your most affectionate, humble servant. It might be more the case that it was Johnson who changed more than his native town did, as often happens. I found an irreconcilable difference had taken place between Johnson and Sheridan. A pension of £200 a year had been given to Sheridan. Johnson, who, as has been already mentioned, thought slightingly of Sheridan's art, upon hearing that he was also pensioned, exclaimed, "What? Have they given him a pension? Then it is time for me to give up mine." Johnson complained that a man who disliked him repeated his sarcasm to Mr. Sheridan without telling him what followed, which was, that after a pause he added, "However, I am glad that Mr. Sheridan has a pension, for he is a very good man." Sheridan could never forgive this hastily contemptuous expression. It rankled in his mind, and though I informed him of all that Johnson said, and that he would be very glad to meet him amicably, he positively declined repeated offers which I made, and once went off abruptly from a house where he and I were engaged to dine, because he was told that Dr. Johnson was to be there. Falling out with former friends, it happens to the best and worst of us. In the year 1763. Concerning this unfortunate poet, Christopher Smart, who was confined in a madhouse, he had at another time the following conversation with Dr. Burney. Burney: "How does poor Smart do, sir? Is he likely to recover?" Johnson: "It seems as if his mind had ceased to struggle with the disease, for he grows fat upon it." Burney: "Perhaps, sir, that may be from want of exercise." Johnson: "No, sir, he has partly as much exercise as he used to have, for he digs in the garden. Indeed, before his confinement, he used for exercise to walk to the alehouse, but he was carried back again. I did not think he ought to be shut up. His infirmities were not noxious to society. He insisted on people praying with him, and I'd as lief pray with Kit Smart as anyone else. Another charge was that he did not love clean linen, and I have no passion for it." Johnson continued: "Mankind have a great aversion to intellectual labour, but even supposing knowledge to be easily attainable, more people would be content to be ignorant than would take even a little trouble to acquire it." I wouldn't be as critical as Johnson here, re mankind. One major problem today is that there's so much information available that it can be hard to know what's true and what's not true. He told me that he generally went abroad at 4 in the afternoon and seldom came home till 2 in the morning. I took the liberty to ask if he did not think it wrong to live thus, and not make more use of his great talents. He owned it was a bad habit. Sure look, if I could avoid Columbia's tienda bars, I'd be a world leader. I had learnt that his place of frequent resort was the Mitre Tavern in Fleet Street, where he loved to sit up late, and I begged I might be allowed to pass an evening with him there soon, which he promised I should. A few days afterwards I met him near Temple Bar, about 1 o'clock in the morning, and asked if he would then go to the Mitre. "Sir, it is too late. They won't let us in, but I'll go with you another night, with all my heart." Though very desirous of obtaining Dr. Johnson's advice and instructions on the mode of pursuing my studies, I was at this time so occupied, shall I call it, or so dissipated by the amusements of London, that our next meeting was not till Saturday, June 25th, when happening to dine at Clifton's eating-house. Dissipated. A word to describe most of my time in Columbia? Sir, I make a distinction between what a man may experience by the mere strength of his imagination, and what imagination cannot possibly produce. Thus, suppose I should think that I saw a form and heard a voice cry, "Johnson, you are a very wicked fellow, and unless you repent you will certainly be punished." My own unworthiness is so deeply impressed upon my mind that I might imagine I thus saw and heard, and therefore I should not believe that an external communication had been made to me. But if a form should appear, and a voice should tell me that a particular man had died at a particular place and a particular hour, a fact which I had no apprehension of, nor any means of knowing, and this fact, with all its circumstances, should afterwards be unquestionably proved, I should, in that case, be persuaded that I had supernatural intelligence imparted to me. So, Dr. Johnson, do you believe in ghosts or not? A yes or no answer. As Dr. Oliver Goldsmith will frequently appear in this narrative, I shall endeavour to make my readers in some degree acquainted with his singular character. He was a native of Ireland and a contemporary with Mr. Burke at Trinity College, Dublin, but did not then give much promise of future celebrity. He, however, observed to Mr. Malone that, though he made no great figure in mathematics, which was a study in much repute there, he could turn an ode of Horace into English better than any of them. On Oliver Goldsmith. When accompanying two beautiful young ladies with their mother on a tour in France, he was seriously angry that more attention was paid to them than to him, and once at the exhibition of the Fantoccini in London, when those who sat next him observed with what dexterity a puppet was made to toss a pike, he could not bear that it should have such praise, and exclaimed with some warmth, "Pshaw, I can do it better myself." Johnson on the poet Churchill. I called the fellow a blockhead at first, and I will call him a blockhead still. However, I will acknowledge that I have a better opinion of him now than I once had, for he has shown more fertility than I expected. To be sure, he is a tree that cannot produce good fruit. He only bears crabs. But, sir, a tree that produces a great many crabs is better than a tree which produces only a few. Disconcerted a little by this, Mr. Ogilvy then took new ground, where I suppose he thought himself perfectly safe, for he observed that Scotland had a great many noble wild prospects. Johnson. I believe, sir, you have a great many. Norway, too, has noble wild prospects, and Lapland is remarkable for prodigious noble wild prospects. But, sir, let me tell you, the noblest prospect which a Scotchman ever sees is the high road that leads him to England. This unexpected and pointed sally produced a roar of applause. After all, however, those who admire the rude grandeur of nature cannot deny it to Caledonia. An old quip, that one, the road to England. Johnson on Boswell's poor relationship with his father. Why, sir, I am a man of the world. I live in the world, and I take, in some degree, the colour of the world as it moves along. Your father is a judge in a remote part of the island, and all his notions are taken from the old world. Besides, sir, there must always be a struggle between a father and son, while one aims at power and the other at independence. While one aims at power and the other at independence. I can relate to that. Idleness is a disease which must be combated, but I would not advise a rigid adherence to a particular plan of study. I myself have never persisted in any plan for 2 days altogether. A man ought to read just as inclination leads him, for what he reads as a task will do him little good. A young man should read 5 hours in a day, and so may acquire a great deal of knowledge. Today, educational or informative podcasts and YouTube videos count, don't they? A servant's strict regard for truth must be weakened by such a practice. A philosopher may know that it is merely a form of denial, but few servants are such nice distinguishers. If I accustom a servant to tell a lie for me, have I not reason to apprehend that he will tell many lies for himself? His case for not encouraging the telling of lies, I'm not sure how Johnson would have coped in Colombia. Perhaps he who has a large fortune may not be so happy as he who has a small one, but that must proceed from other causes than from his having the large fortune. For, coeteris paribus, he who is rich in a civilized society must be happier than he who is poor, as riches, if properly used, and it is a man's own fault if they are not, must be productive of the highest advantages. Money, to be sure, of itself is of no use, for its only use is to part with it. I tend to agree, better having it than not having it. I remember very well, when I was at Oxford, an old gentleman said to me, "Young man, ply your book diligently now and acquire a stock of knowledge, for when years come upon you, you will find that poring upon books will be but an irksome task." I'm not sure as to the validity of this remark. Sir, it is no matter what you teach them first, any more than what leg you shall put into your breeches first. Sir, you may stand disputing which is best to put in first, but in the meantime your breech is bare. Sir, while you are considering which of two things you should teach your child first, another boy has learnt them both. The curse of procrastination and indecision. Sir, a woman's preaching is like a dog's walking on his hinder legs. It is not done well, but you are surprised to find it done at all. No comment. Though by no means niggardly, his attention to what was generally right was so minute that, having observed at one of the stages that I ostentatiously gave a shilling to the coachman, when the custom was for each passenger to give only 6 pence, he took me aside and scolded me, saying that what I had done would make the coachman dissatisfied with all the rest of the passengers, who gave him no more than his due. This was a just reprimand, for, in whatever way a man may indulge his generosity or his vanity in spending his money, for the sake of others he ought not to raise the price of any article for which there is a constant demand. Hear, hear, and a case against the tipping culture. Businesses should pay fair wages, and let that be it. When invited to dine, even with an intimate friend, he was not pleased if something better than a plain dinner was not prepared for him. I have heard him say on such an occasion, "This was a good dinner enough, to be sure, but it was not a dinner to ask a man to." I, on the contrary, am pretty happy to eat almost anything, especially if somebody else is paying for it or cooking it. 1764, at age 55. He this year says, "I have now spent 55 years in resolving, having, from the earliest time almost that I can remember, been forming schemes of a better life. I have done nothing. The need of doing, therefore, is pressing, since the time of doing is short." Live with a sense of urgency, advice I need to follow. 1765. Nothing could be more fortunate for Johnson than this connection. He had at Mr. Thrall's all the comforts and even luxuries of life. His melancholy was diverted, and his irregular habits lessened by association with an agreeable and well-ordered family. He was treated with the utmost respect, and even affection. It's like when I get a fully equipped, nice house to look after, my melancholy is diverted, to an extent. You are to calculate, and not pay too dear for what you get. You must not give a shilling's worth of court for 6 pence worth of good. But if you can get a shilling's worth of good for 6 pence worth of court, you are a fool if you do not pay court. Make sure you're up in the deal. We cannot prove any man's intention to be bad. You may shoot a man through the head and say you intended to miss him, but the judge will order you to be hanged. An alleged want of intention, when evil is committed, will not be allowed in a court of justice. Rousseau, sir, is a very bad man. On his favourite subject of subordination, Johnson said, "So far is it from being true that men are naturally equal, that no two people can be half an hour together, but one shall acquire an evident superiority over the other." Quite, but we all have something in which we excel, I think. On thinking of those who are in a worse situation than ourselves. This, I observed, could not apply to all, for there must be some who have nobody worse than they are. Johnson. Why, to be sure, sir, there are. But they don't know it. There is no being so poor and so contemptible who does not think there is somebody still poorer and still more contemptible. Then the vulgar, sir, never can know they are right, but must submit themselves to the learned. Johnson. To be sure, sir, the vulgar are the children of the state, and must be taught like children. Then, sir, a poor Turk must be a Mohammedan, just as a poor Englishman must be a Christian. Why, yes, sir. And what then? This now is such stuff as I used to talk to my mother, when I first began to think myself a clever fellow, and she ought to have whipped me for it. But we vulgar folk can now read and think for ourselves, most of us anyway, and who knows the truth when it comes to religious belief. February 1767. His Majesty inquired if he was then writing anything. He answered he was not, for he had pretty well told the world what he knew, and must now read to acquire more knowledge. The king, as it should seem with a view to urge him to rely on his own stores as an original writer, and to continue his labours, then said, "I do not think you borrow much from anybody." Johnson said he thought he had already done his part as a writer. "I should have thought so too," said the king, "if you had not written so well." Johnson observed to me upon this that, No man could have paid a handsomer compliment, and it was fit for a king to pay. It was decisive. Kind of my approach. I try to be original. His Majesty having observed to him that he supposed he must have read a great deal, Johnson answered that he thought more than he read, that he had read a great deal in the early part of his life, but having fallen into ill health, he had not been able to read much, compared with others. Thinking more than reading. My problem is thinking much more than doing. A pacer for my thoughts? If only. 1768. He said he had lately been a long while at Lichfield, but had grown very weary before he left it. I wonder at that, sir. It is your native place. Why, so is Scotland your native place? I can relate when I feel a little lost in my birthplace. He praised Signor Baretti. His account of Italy is a very entertaining book, and, sir, I know no man who carries his head higher in conversation than Baretti. There are strong powers in his mind. He has not, indeed, many hooks, but with what hooks he has, he grapples very forcibly. Play well the cards one is dealt, if one can read the cards, that is. 1769. One evening about this time, when his lordship did me the honour to sup at my lodgings with Dr. Robertson and several other men of literary distinction, he regretted that Johnson had not been educated with more refinement, and lived more in polished society. No, no, my lord, said Signor Baretti, do with him what you would. He would always have been a bear. True, answered the Earl with a smile, but he would have been a dancing bear. By applying to him the epithet of a bear, let me impress upon my readers a just and happy saying of my friend Goldsmith, who knew him well. Johnson, to be sure, has a roughness in his manner, but no man alive has a more tender heart. He has nothing of the bear but his skin. 1769, at the age of 60. Mr. Seward heard him once say that a man has a very bad chance for happiness in that state unless he marries a woman of very strong and fixed principles of religion. He maintained to me, contrary to the common notion, that a woman would not be the worse wife for being learned, in which, from all that I have observed of Artemiseus, I humbly differed from him. When I censured a gentleman of my acquaintance for marrying a second time, as it showed a disregard of his first wife, he said, Not at all, sir. On the contrary, were he not to marry again, it might be concluded that his first wife had given him a disgust to marriage. But by taking a second wife, he pays the highest compliment to the first, by showing that she made him so happy as a married man that he wishes to be so a second time. I presume that her having been married before had, at times, given him some uneasiness, for I remember his observing upon the marriage of one of our common friends, He has done a very foolish thing, sir. He has married a widow, when he might have had a maid. I'd smile with the simple and feed with the poor. Nay, my dear lady, this will never do. Poor David, smile with the simple, what folly is that? And who would feed with the poor that can help it? No, no, let me smile with the wise and feed with the rich. I need to smile with the wise and feed with the rich more often. General Paoli talked of languages being formed on the particular notions and manners of a people, without knowing which, we cannot know the language. We may know the direct signification of single words, but by these no beauty of expression, no sally of genius, no wit is conveyed to the mind. To truly get a language of a people, one needs to understand their culture. I proposed, as usual upon such occasions, to order dinner to be served, adding, ought 6 people to be kept waiting for one? Why, yes, answered Johnson with a delicate humanity. If the one will suffer more by your sitting down, then the 6 will do by waiting. This little incidental quarrel and reconciliation, which perhaps I may be thought to have detailed too minutely, must be esteemed as one of many proofs which his friends had, that though he might be charged with bad humour at times, he was always a good-natured man. And I have heard Sir Joshua Reynolds, a nice and delicate observer of manners, particularly remark, that when upon any occasion Johnson had been rough to any person in company, he took the first opportunity of reconciliation by drinking to him, or addressing his discourse to him. But if he found his dignified indirect overtures sullenly neglected, he was quite indifferent, and considered himself as having done all that he ought to do, and the other as now in the wrong. I do relate to such a mindset. 1770, at the age of 61. Speaking of a dull, tiresome fellow whom he chanced to meet, he said, "That fellow seems to me to possess but one idea, and that is a wrong one." 1771, aged 62. When I review the last year, I am able to recollect so little done that shame and sorrow, though perhaps too weakly, come upon me. I hear you, Samuel. Most of my years have been like that. Have you subscribed to this channel yet? If not, why not do so right now? It's free and only takes a second. Thanks!